Explore the turning points of history with Global Chronicles. Let us explore the 9/11s, the day that changed the world. On a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning, the world was about to change forever. No one knew that by the end of this day, the entire global order would be shaken to its core. This is the story of September 11th, a day that left a deep scar on humanity. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. For the next 17 minutes, confusion and panic spread across the city. People thought it was a tragic accident. But then, at 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower, and the terrifying truth became clear: this was no accident. 4 commercial airliners had been hijacked by 19 terrorists from the militant group Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden. The attacks were part of a coordinated effort to strike at the heart of American power. 2 more planes were hijacked that day. One crashed into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m., the very heart of America's military, while the 4th, United Airlines Flight 93, was headed for another high-profile target, likely the White House or the Capitol. Brave passengers on board fought the hijackers, forcing the plane to crash into a field in Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m., sacrificing their lives to prevent more devastation. By 10:28 a.m., both the North and South Towers had collapsed, sending plumes of dust and debris through the streets of Manhattan. The world watched in shock. Thousands of innocent people lost their lives. People from all walks of life, all nationalities and backgrounds. But this tragic event wasn't just an attack on the United States. It was an assault on the shared values of freedom, security, and peace. The aftermath was swift and far-reaching. The United States government immediately pointed to the involvement of a group of individuals who had trained and prepared for this day for years, operating out of the shadows from foreign lands. The hunt for those responsible began, but it was critical not to generalize this act of terror to any one group, nation, or religion. This was the work of individuals with a specific, violent agenda. On September 20th, 2001, President George W. Bush addressed a joint session of Congress declaring the beginning of the War on Terror. This wasn't just a military operation, it was a global campaign to root out terror networks and prevent another catastrophic event. The world would never be the same. The first target was Afghanistan, where the Taliban regime was suspected of harboring key figures behind the 9/11 attacks. On October 7, 2001, the United States, with support from NATO allies, launched Operation Enduring Freedom. The war initially focused on dismantling terror cells and bringing individuals to justice. But over time, the conflict became more complex. As governments were overthrown, insurgencies rose, and the civilian toll grew. It wasn't just about finding those responsible for 9/11s anymore. The war evolved into a fight for regional stability, nation building, and the long-term security of the world. The war on terror wasn't confined to Afghanistan. Countries across the globe were drawn into the conflict, forming alliances to combat terror threats. The United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and many other countries supported the U.S. effort, contributing troops, intelligence, and resources. Meanwhile, countries in the Middle East, including Pakistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, faced immense pressure and consequences. Some were accused of harboring militants, others became battlegrounds for ideological and geopolitical conflicts. Pakistan became a key player in intelligence gathering, while Iraq was drawn into the fray. In 2003, the U.S. expanded its campaign to Iraq, under the belief that it held weapons of mass destruction and was a potential threat. Though no such weapons were found, the invasion marked the beginning of another prolonged conflict, one that further destabilized the region, creating power vacuums and new challenges. The global impact of 9/11s was immense. Airports tightened security, governments enacted counter-terrorism laws, and intelligence agencies began working closer than ever before. The world had become a different place, where surveillance and suspicion grew, and civil liberties were sometimes strained in the name of safety. The economic toll was devastating. The attacks directly cost the United States economy billions, while the long-term cost of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq would eventually reach trillions of dollars. International trade was disrupted, and global markets were sent into turmoil. But the scars weren't just financial. Societies across the world were impacted. Thousands of families lost loved ones in the attacks and the wars that followed. Countries like Afghanistan and Iraq saw decades of instability, while countries like the United States and its allies faced the complex challenge of balancing security and freedom. In 2011, a decade after the attacks, U.S. Navy SEALs located and killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. It was a symbolic victory, but by then, the war had left deep scars on all sides. The war on terror also sparked debates on civil rights, foreign policy, and human rights. Protests erupted around the world, criticizing the prolonged military engagements, the use of drone warfare, and the loss of civilian life. The debate over the justification of these wars and their aftermath continues to this day. 20 years later, the events of 9/11 still shape the world we live in. From airport security measures to foreign policy decisions, the consequences of that day ripple through our lives. The rise of new extremist groups, the refugee crises in the Middle East, and shifts in global alliances are all part of the long shadow cast by that fateful day. But despite the chaos, the global community also showed resilience. In the face of terror, individuals, nations, and communities came together to rebuild, to help one another, and to promote a vision of a world free from violence and fear. 9/11 was a dark chapter in human history, but it also reminded us of the strength of the human spirit. While we remember the pain and loss, we must also honor the stories of bravery, unity, and hope that emerged in its aftermath. The world changed on that day, but the lessons we learned about the fragility of peace, the importance of justice, and the need for global cooperation remain as crucial as ever. Keep exploring the events that shaped our world. Subscribe to Global Chronicles for more and comment the events you want to listen from us.